This man is about to have a work capability assessment to see if he can stay on disability benefits or is fit for work.
What are the current problems with your health?
I have COPD, emphysema.
More than 2 million claimants have to take this test. Its aim to weed out bogus claimants and get those who can work back into employment. But has it gone too far?
I think for people who are generally unwell, have not done anything wrong in their lives, to have to be put through this system is just despicable.
The government pays £100 million a year to French company Atos Healthcare to run the system. Yet thousands of disabled people up and down the country say it's pushing them to the brink.
Our client had actually taken several overdoses and the assessor said to them, well, why aren't you dead?
And even the government's troubleshooter thinks it needs to change.
There will be people who will suffer, and I don't like that.
The welfare state is expensive. £13 billion of our taxes are spent on incapacity benefits. Now the government says the system needs to be tightened up and have introduced the Welfare Reform Act to do just that.
Almost £1 in every 3 spent by the government is spent on welfare. We need to have a welfare system that the country can properly afford.
Disability benefits are one of the areas being targeted. Nearly 7% of the working age population in the UK claim benefits because they're too ill to work. Some are simply lying. The man in the white t-shirt told benefit officials he couldn't walk without a stick, but he was capable of doing this, attacking passers-by and the police. Then there's this man who claimed disability benefits but still managed to run the London Marathon. And just last week, this lottery millionaire was jailed for benefit fraud. But the outright cheats are a small minority. Less than 0.5% of incapacity benefit claims are thought to be fraudulent. The real issue, according to government, is not the scammers, but those who may be fit enough to work if given help. Critics say it's about saving £10 billion in benefits payments. The government's man in charge denies that.
It's not a financial exercise. It's about saying it's a huge waste of life for so many people to be left at home on benefits doing nothing. No one has ever actually asked the question, do you have the potential to return to work? And I very passionately believe that if we can help people back into work, they are much better off than they are if they're left stranded at home on benefits for the rest of their lives.
It was the last Labour government which began to reform the old incapacity benefit system in 2008. For the new benefit, called Employment Support Allowance, claimants would be tested to see whether any of them could come off the benefit and do some sort of work. The test was called a work capability assessment. The current government picked up the ball and kept running. They enhanced the test, and now everyone who's on benefits because they're too ill to work has to be assessed. 4 years since the assessment's introduction, a third of those who were claiming incapacity benefit have been found fit for work. But is it just weeding out the undeserving? I want to meet the people at the sharp end. Chris Davis is one of them.
We stop for a minute.
Sure, are you okay?
Yeah.
Chris worked all his life in the steel industry and then as a lorry driver.
I enjoyed the job. It was long hours, early morning starts, but I enjoyed it.
But in 2009, he became seriously ill with a chest infection that wouldn't go away. It turned out to be the chronic lung disease emphysema. One morning, his breathing was so laboured, he was rushed to hospital.
One of the doctors called us into the office and she told me that he'd got 2 days to live, and she said, I would advise you to go home, look through all your holiday snaps and just remember all the good times and prepare for his funeral.
Chris pulled through, but returning to work was out of the question. He was assessed, found unfit for work and given employment support allowance of just under £90 a week. He settled into a life coping with his illness. For Chris, just climbing the stairs can be a challenge.
I can't walk far, 50 metres before I have to stop. I have to lean against something, catch my breath.
Last year, he was called in for another work capability assessment. It's a points-based system. The more points you get, the less able you are to work. You need 15 points or more to keep your benefits.
In May, I received a letter saying I hadn't passed the medical assessment and I was fit for work. I was shocked because there was no way I could work, well, not physically. And according to my doctors, I was unfit for work.
The assessment was clear. Chris received no points. He was fit for work.
When they turned around and said they were stopping my benefits altogether, I thought, what are we going to do?
He could still claim job seekers allowance, but only if he's well enough to actively seek work. Some of the groups running the government's work programme have told Panorama many of the people they're asked to deal with are clearly unfit for work. Chris decided to appeal and went to a tribunal.
It did cause me a lot of stress because I was thinking, if I go to this tribunal and I lose that, I won't get any money at all, and I wouldn't be able to work.
Chris won. His benefits were restored and backdated. His case is far from unique. More than 176,000 cases go to appeal tribunals every year, costing the taxpayer a further £50 million. The most recent government figures suggest on average about 30% of those cases are being overturned. Welfare rights advisor Neil Bateman says his success rate is much higher.
I think I've won all of them so far, and other advisors are getting very similar success rates. 80–90% with experienced advisors is quite common, which is really ridiculous that we're getting such a fantastic success rate.
What does that tell you about the system?
It tells you the system is badly flawed, that the assessment process, the way they gather the evidence, and the quality of the decision making is badly wrong.
If you have roughly 176,000 appeals a year, and even by your own figures, a third of them are successful, that can't be right, can it?
Well, I think you have to look at why the appeals are successful. I wish the judges sometimes looked beyond the first impression and thought, is it really the case that these people could not return to any form of work?
All over Britain, we've been hearing from people who are appealing.
I've recently been diagnosed with inflammatory arthritis, which is a progressive condition causing constant joint pain.
I used to be a freelance photographer. However, I developed a severe case of depression for which I am receiving a very high dosage of medication.
The decision about whether someone is fit to work will be taken by officials at the Department of Work and Pensions, based just here. But a significant factor in making that decision will be the initial assessment carried out by Atos Healthcare, which is a private company. It's this initial test which has come in for huge criticism from hundreds of thousands of people up and down the country, and the advisors who are helping them overturn the decisions made.
They'll ask you things like, can you move an empty cardboard box? And that's because one of the activities is your ability to reach and move things around. But I can't think of a job that involves moving empty cardboard boxes.
The government admits that there's room for improvement. 2 years ago, they appointed Professor Malcolm Harrington to independently review the system. He believes the test on its own has serious limitations.
If you rely entirely upon the questionnaire, the computer program, yes, it won't work. And I think it's now been shown not to work. You have to involve human beings looking at all the information that's available because they're dealing with human beings.
We've also spoken to 5 people who have carried out the test. Like all Atos healthcare assessors, they're medically qualified. Most were afraid to go on the record because they had signed confidentiality agreements. One gave us permission to use their statement and told us the system is too rigid.
There are people you'd like to be able to award ESA to, and you can't. And if you're doing it absolutely honestly, they just don't get the points. And then, that's it, they're stuffed.
We've decided to follow two people going through the assessment process. This is Marie Aldridge from Hertfordshire. She's 21 and has a condition called fibromyalgia, which means her joints can easily dislocate.
I've been working since I left school when I was 16. I've had various jobs, mainly customer service, call centre type things, but I've lost quite a few of them down to my fibromyalgia. So I gave in and applied for ESA.
This will be Marie's first ESA assessment, and she's agreed for it to be secretly filmed.
To lift the arms a bit above you and to put them back to the neck. And then we try and keep them straight in front.
Left leg as high as you can.
On the same day in North Wales, Chris Davis is attending his third assessment, despite previously winning an appeal which made it clear he was not fit for work.
And then forward as far as you can reach. Thank you.
Will these assessments help reveal why some disabled people are being denied benefit?
It seems to be clear today. That's the trouble with it. The doctor say it's clear.
This doctor doesn't ask him for more detail about his breathing or for other medical evidence. But then that's not his job. He's here to conduct the assessment as it's been designed, and he follows procedures properly. But it's very different from how Chris's own doctors monitor his condition.
They can't tell by listening to it. The consultant, every time I go to see him, he sends me for an x-ray. And then he takes blood samples as well.
Marie's assessment, like Chris's, takes 20 minutes.
And then can you make a fist as well?
Atos Insiders told us they're often pressed for time because of the amount of paperwork they have to do for each examination.
We're under pressure to see 8 people a day, even if it's impossible to do. I'd like to think that the quality of my work's very consistent, but the time pressure doesn't help. And working for Atos, it's one of the least popular things for healthcare professionals, is being pressurised and being put on performance reviews.
We wanted to ask Atos whether assessors had enough time to consider all relevant information. They refused to be interviewed, but told us their staff carry out thousands of assessments every month in accordance with the detailed guidelines as set by the Department of Work and Pensions. Any serious suggestion that our work has fallen short of the high standards we set ourselves is investigated as a matter of course. So, 2 years in, what does the government's independent reviewer think of the assessment?
It's better than it was.
Is it fit for purpose?
If it's properly done along the recommendations that I've made, it will be fit for purpose.
But do you believe it is fit for purpose across the country?
Right across the country, no, it's patchy, I have to say that. There will be people who, because we're in this interim period, who will suffer. And I don't like that.
Some GPs believe they're left to pick up the pieces when patients fail assessments.
I'm seeing people who come to me very, very distressed, having been on long-term benefits for some time with quite clear, unresolvable physical problems, whereby they're going for cursory examinations very rapidly, and having previously passed quite happily, are now failing these tests and now being deemed fit to work, but they're quite clearly not.
Far from saving money, Dr. Johnston says the tests are adding to NHS costs in poor areas.
We're busy at the best of times, and we're now having to fit in more people whose appointments are more for their benefits than they are for their health.
The big question, of course, is not whether the assessment process is failing some sick and disabled people, but the consequences for some of those people when the decision is wrong. Sometimes it can be financially crippling, sometimes psychologically distressing. But across the country, we've spoken to some families who say that the consequences for their loved ones have been much, much worse. The Hills have always been a close family, living near each other in their Derbyshire village. But one person is missing from this picture. Stephen Hill worked as a sandwich delivery man, but he'd been having problems with his health.
he always put it down because his early starts to work and getting up at 4 o'clock, and that's why you're always tired and struggling. And then when he left work and he was still tired and he was still struggling. And then when he left work and he was still tired and he was still struggling, that's when we first knew.
Steve was referred for tests on his heart. He stopped work and applied for ESA. At his first work capability assessment in 2010, wife Denise was by his side.
What happened at that first assessment?
She checked him out, she did his blood pressure and she did his heart, and she says to see a doctor as soon as.
Steve saw his consultant shortly afterwards. Within days, he was diagnosed with heart failure. Then his ESA results arrived. Remember, it was the Atos assessor who told Steve to seek urgent medical help. He was passed fit for work.
How did you both feel when you found out that he had failed?
Shocked. Because what she'd said, and like I said to him, you've got to appeal now because you're not very well, you've got to go.
Steve won his appeal, but the relief was short-lived. Within weeks, he was called back for another assessment. The process was starting again.
I got a letter for another medical. And I couldn't believe it. He'd got to go for a medical when he was waiting for an heart operation. How mad's that?
According to Denise, the second assessor seemed more interested in Steve's knee than anything else.
And I said, what about his heart? And she just turned around and said, we're not here to talk about his heart today, we're here to talk about his knee. And his heart, why? Well, that was the main thing. Knee went out to the side of his heart.
Once again, Steve got 0 points. In the report, the assessors said significant disability due to cardiovascular problems seems unlikely.
What effect did that second assessment have on him?
It was starting to get to him then. He felt belittled. You believe doctors are right because they're medical, they're professionals. I think he started thinking, well, I must be okay now, I must be fit for work if they're telling me that I am. And then took Hoover out and hoovered car out. And as he's taking Hoover back into house, that's when he collapsed and had his heart attack and died.
Stephen Hill died just 39 days after being found fit for work.
I've lost my best friend. The person I could talk to. Tell me problems.
That's it, nice and gentle.
See, we've been having to keep going and signing on and going to doctors, and he shouldn't have been doing all that. He should have been here relaxing, waiting for his operation, not worrying about getting notes for this and notes for that.
Between January and August last year, an average of 32 people who the Department of Work and Pensions ruled could be helped back to work died every week.
I have a progressive disease. My brother died of it about 3 years ago.
Atos Healthcare's government contract is worth £1 billion and runs until 2015, but much of it is shrouded in mystery.
We tried to get hold of the details of that contract, but all they'd give us was a redacted version. They said it was commercially confidential. But some people now fear that the reason so many sick and disabled people are failing the test is because Atos is working to targets.
Both Atos and the government strenuously deny any targets exist.
Let's be absolutely clear. We do not have a financial target for the reassessment of people on incapacity benefit or for the level of new applications for ESA which are successful. Absolutely, categorically, unequivocally, there is no financial target.
Does Atos have targets?
Nope, they don't. There are no targets anywhere in the system for numbers of people to move on to or off benefits.
There may be no targets, but there are forecasts showing how many people the DWP expect to come off benefits. And Atos insiders confirmed numbers do seem to matter. If it's accepted someone's too sick or disabled to work, they're put into something called the support group. with full benefits of £96 a week. 3 insiders told us there's internal pressure to avoid putting too many people in that group.
If you were support grouping more than whatever the average is, about 20%, you'll be notified by your mentor, and if you're castigating doctors, nurses, physios for straying away from the average, that kind of does have the feeling that there are indeed targets.
Moving people off disability benefits when they've been living on them for years isn't easy. The government's answer is a work programme, which includes something called the Work-Related Activity Group. It's for those who, with support, may be able to work again. One of its architects was Professor Paul Gregg.
There are a lot of people who want to work. The disability community as a whole has been very strong and vocal in saying that disabled people shouldn't be shut out of the world of work. So ESA is hoping to move quite a few people off of disability-related benefits back into work.
He's concerned people may be being wrongly put into the work-related group.
There's a question mark in the sense of, are there people who are inappropriately being put into this kind of programme who really there is no serious hope or prospect of moving into work.
Sharon Thompson suffers from a degenerative disease of the spine, as well as severe osteoporosis and osteoarthritis. She's on morphine to ease the pain.
A lot of people say you have good days and bad days. I don't know, because I'm never out of pay. I was always active. I mean, I was a security officer on building sites.
Sharon's husband is now her full-time carer.
Going back, nobody ever imagines how much a life can change in a short space of time.
After her ESA assessment, Sharon was put in the work-related activity group.
What did you think when that decision was made?
I think I was gobsmacked more than anything. It wasn't as I didn't want to work, but what work can they give me? When I go to the toilets, my husband has to help me to pull, everything down for me and back up. You know what I mean? What job can they give me with somebody there doing that for me?
There are government schemes which help pay for specialist support in the workplace, but Sharon felt that was unrealistic. She appealed and won. Then she was put in the work-related group again. She appealed again and won again.
It must seem like a bit of a never-ending nightmare to you.
Oh, terrible. Because it never goes away in your mind. Every week you're waiting for another form come through.
We've had people who have had multiple appeals and multiple assessments. That can't be right, can it?
It's been apparent to me in the last few months that we were calling people back too regularly, and I've instructed the officials who operate the system to actually make sure we leave a much more sensible interval between the two. What you can't do, though, is simply say to people, go away and we won't talk to you again. This was the problem with the old system.
Since ESA was introduced, at least 7,000 people have, like Sharon, appealed successfully and been moved into the support group where it's accepted they're unlikely to work again.
There's a perception within DWP that there are large amounts of people on disability benefits who just shouldn't be there, and what they're doing is trying to find them and weed them out. Yeah? What I feel has not been done enough is to worry about the impact it's having on people's lives going through that process.
Last year, because of the terrible pain and chronic fatigue I suffer with rheumatoid arthritis, I had to give up work and was medically retired.
I used to work in IT, but I had to give it up because of multiple sclerosis. Now I need help getting out of bed.
Dealing with someone's physical disabilities is one thing, but what if they have mental health problems? Well, that's something they know all about here at the Maudsley Hospital in South London. In fact, they say they're picking up the tab for a system that has gone badly wrong.
Andy King has bipolar disorder. He was already feeling unwell when told he'd have to be reassessed for ESA.
This was quite a blow, actually. I thought perhaps I might lose a big part of my benefit, and so that kind of was a body blow, and that's what resulted partially in me being admitted to the Maudsley in mid-November.
Andy was catatonic and unable to speak.
I was told, whilst I was actually in the Maudsley, that they had assessed me and put me in the work-related activity group round about December.
So you were in hospital?
Yeah. I was actually sectioned under the Mental Health Act, and they put me in the work-related activity group.
The Maudsley has a dedicated welfare team. They appealed the result and won. They say they're now overwhelmed in helping people like Andy fight wrong decisions. That's quite apart from the cost of treating people who feel they've been driven to the brink by dealing with the ESA system.
We're having to call upon the resources of the doctors and nurses and social workers to put everything all together to send off.
And this is all work you wouldn't have done before?
Wouldn't have done it before, no.
Just going through the assessment can be harrowing for many people with mental illness.
We had a lady, she actually had her care coordinator with her. They asked her many different things about her illness. Our client had actually taken several overdoses, and the assessor said to them, well, why aren't you dead?
Why aren't you dead?
Why aren't you dead? And so the client became very distraught at that point. Her care coordinator said, stop the interview.
This is a lady with serious mental health issues?
Serious mental health issues, yes. And the assessor said that if they stopped the interview, the client would lose their benefits straight away.
We asked Atos about the impact assessments had on the people we've met for this film. They told us, we are clearly very aware that these assessments can be stressful for those involved, and we go to great lengths to ensure that those assessed are treated both professionally and sympathetically. The government says the system is being improved. Atos assessors are being retrained, and staff at the DWP will rely less heavily in future on Atos assessments alone. But there's some way to go, according to the man who recommended that training.
There are certainly areas where it's still not working. And yes, I'm sorry that there are still people going through a system which I think still needs improvement. And the improvements haven't reached their neck of the woods, or it hasn't been implemented appropriately by these people because they haven't finished their training.
The government says, despite the difficulties, it is, in the end, for the good of people who are sick and disabled.
There are people who don't believe they can work anymore, don't believe they have any options to return to the workplace. And we're pushing them through something that David Cameron once described as tough love, because we believe many of them can make a return to the workplace.
Remember Marie Aldridge? Her assessment results are in. She's been placed in the work-related activity group. Marie is delighted and hopes she'll now get the kind of support she needs to get back into work. Chris Davis had his assessment the same day, but he's still anxiously waiting for a result. Last week, he started coughing blood and is back in hospital. Meanwhile, up and down the country, tens of thousands of people are still struggling with a system they believe is at best frustrating and at worst seriously damaging to their health.
Right, thank you very much.
For patients, it's awful. I think for people who are generally unwell, have not done anything wrong in their lives, to have to be put through this system is just despicable.
The question now is whether the assessment process judging them fit for work is itself fit for purpose. Next week, rats, bedbugs and cockroaches. As council pest control teams face the axe, we meet the super rats immune to poison and discover how easy it is to set up in the pest control business.